Well, flags across the U.S. will fly at half-staff for the next 30 days as the nation mourns the loss of the only president in American history to reach the age of 100, Jimmy Carter. Cannons are firing every half hour at the West Point Military Academy today in a tribute to the former naval officer who died yesterday at the age of 100. Carter ascended from a family peanut farm to the nation's highest office, where he was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for his diplomatic efforts after leaving office. Back in 2018, he told CBS News what he hoped people will remember him for.
How do you want to be remembered?
Well, but my family, I hope I can be remembered as a good great-grandfather and a good grandfather and a good father. By my wife, I hope I can be remembered as a good husband. But in politics, as a champion of peace and human rights.
We have team coverage for you this morning. CBS News correspondent Skyler Henry is live in Atlanta. Our Mark Strassmann is in the former president's hometown of Plains, Georgia. And Edo Keef is monitoring political reaction out of West Palm Beach, Florida. Let's go ahead and start in Atlanta with Skyler Henry at the headquarters for really one of Carter's most enduring legacies, the Carter Center. So, Skyler, tell us about how people are paying tribute there.
Hey, Lindsay, good morning to you. Well, in the hours and really days following the announcement of President Carter's death, we've seen many people flock here to the Carter Center with flowers, even a jar of peanuts, all marking their remembrance of the man that they say meant so much to not only the city of Atlanta, but to the state of Georgia, as well as around the world. One person that we heard from yesterday said that the former president was one of her favorite people. With her boyfriend being the second person who happened to be one of her favorites, but saying that ultimately she was just so admirable of the work that he was able to accomplish around the world, really saying that he and his wife Rosalind Carter were beacons for so many around the world as it relates to health and democracy and bringing about peace to certain war-torn countries as well, and really the work that they have been able to do throughout the Carter Center for the last 40-some-odd years. And really, if you listen to the old story, they say that this is a place that came to the former president in a dream, knowing that he did not want to rest on his laurels of what he was able to accomplish during his time in office, whether that is bringing about that peace agreement in the Middle East or figuring out a nuclear arms agreement with the then Soviet Union, or even his humanitarian assistance that he was able to accomplish at that time. He knew that there was more that he wanted to accomplish, and obviously with the help of his wife Rosalind, as well as others, they were able to establish this center and also do so much around the world. I talked about health, eradicating worm disease in Guinea. That is certainly significant, considering that is the second human disease in history to be eradicated after smallpox. He knew that this is something that he wanted to move forward with as it relates to just doing more for people throughout the world. And then also, the stuff that he was able to accomplish through Habitat for Humanity and other efforts here, helping out the homeless. And I think that many, where Mark is down in Plains, knew him most for those Sunday school sermons that he would help issue, and so many around the world flocked there for that. And so this is really a time that so many really wanted to come out and pay their respects and say thank you to the president for the work that he and his family have been able to accomplish.
How can members of the public pay their respects?
Yeah, well, the Carter Center has established an online book where people can leave their condolences. That's at jimmycartertribute.org. That is for folks who aren't able to attend any of these services in person. We know that before that state funeral up in Washington, D.C., that there will be events here at the Carter Center where the public will be given an opportunity to pay their respects. And so if they are not able or available to do that, they will have their opportunity to leave their condolences online as well.
Skyler Henry, thank you. We now go to Mark Strassmann in Plains, Georgia, where former President Carter grew up and where he spent the last years of his life. Mark, there is so much history for the Carter family where you are. What are you hearing from relatives and neighbors so far?
Hey, Lindsay. This, of course, is a moment of intense private family grief for the Carters. We haven't actually seen them out in public making statements or doing anything else so far. Again, completely understandable, of course. Jimmy Carter had 4 children, 11 grandchildren, 14 great-grandchildren. Chip Carter is one of his 3 sons. He released a statement for us. I'm going to read a piece of it here. My father was a hero not only to me, but to everyone who believes in peace, human rights, and unselfish love. The world is our family because of the way he brought people together. That last phrase, of course, is key, the way he brought people together. That is part of Jimmy Carter's legacy. Back in September, I talked to one of his grandchildren, Jason Carter, and asked him about that legacy. He believes when history casts the final ballot, it'll be a vote for Jimmy Carter.
I think he has always looked for a different judgment than the one that comes from politics. And I think that his faith and his beliefs about this country and the world make him happy with where he is.
And Jason Carter also told me just how lucky he feels, lucky that he had the chance over the last 25 years to work with his grandfather on so many different projects that mattered to Jimmy Carter. And many of those projects, Lindsay, of course, are another part of the Jimmy Carter legacy.
What about the people and the community of Plains? How are they reacting?
I mean, if you've never been to Plains, Lindsay, it's hard to describe just how small of a small town it is. Several hundred people, not a single stoplight. They have an interesting relationship with the Carter family. On the one hand, very proud of the Carters and Jimmy Carter in particular, the way he put Plains on the map. I mean, look at the sign behind me. But they're also protective of the family. And so far, the response has been muted. I think in part just to give the family some space, give them a chance to grieve in private. But no doubt more reaction is going to be coming in the days ahead, Lindsay.
Mark Strassmann, thank you so much. Let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who is covering President-elect Trump from West Palm Beach, Florida. So, Ed, Trump offered some gracious words for Carter, even though the former president said in October he had fulfilled his wish to live long enough to vote for Vice President Harris in the election. What did Trump say, and how would you characterize their relationship?
Notably effusive last night in several social media posts. Lindsay, good to be with you. He said that while he strongly disagreed with Carter, the late president, quote, worked hard to make America a better place, and for that I give him my highest respect. Trump, like President Biden, who we'll get to in a moment, had a much deeper, profound political and personal relationship. Like the other former presidents, Trump sometimes got a little criticism from Carter and sometimes found himself in surprise agreement with him. Carter, of course, having been the longest-serving former president and having been someone who traveled the world, focused on issues like social justice, peace, concern about genocide and war, would often find themselves on the other side of an argument from the sitting president, much to their consternation, because it would ultimately generate headlines. So we should talk through what we've heard from some of them. For example, Bill Clinton now, the only surviving president from the 20th century, the only other deep Southern president, said in a statement yesterday that Carter had worked tirelessly for a better, fairer world. They, of course, aligned almost from the beginning of Carter's presidential ambitions, because Clinton then became the young governor from Arkansas and saw real hope for Democrats in the South, which, of course, eventually led to his election in 1992. George W. Bush had a pretty troubled relationship with Carter when he was serving those 2 terms, most especially over post-9/11 wars and policy, especially the treatment of terrorists and the situation in the Middle East. But Bush said that Carter was, quote, a man of deeply held convictions, and later said that he, quote, dignified the office. That's notable because, of course, Bush himself was also elected to better dignify the office after the Clinton years. So for him to say that about a Democrat is notable. Barack Obama pointed out that Carter had been elected to, quote, always tell the truth, and he did, advocating for the public good, consequences be damned. They usually found themselves in agreement on things, Lindsay, but on the situation in Syria especially, Carter was at times quite critical.
What does it tell you that he's getting praise from top Democrats and Republicans?
Well, again, the work he did after his presidency and sort of how universal it was, the work with Habitat for Humanity, flying to different countries to ensure the freedom of American hostages, working to ensure that elections were held in fragile democracies around the world freely and openly. He was often an election observer with other international organizations. That's the kind of work that Democratic and Republican politicians generally agree with, right? And they also appreciate the fact that he lived such a humble and in sort of faith-based life, something that they all aspire to. We should also point out President Biden, who's vacationing in St. Croix, not too far from here, relatively, said last night, or recounted last night, the 5 decades of friendship that they had. Biden, remember, was a young U.S. senator and the first sitting senator to endorse Carter's presidential campaign back in 1975, 1976, when most of Washington scoffed at the notion that a peanut farmer could become president. But Carter never forgot that Biden was with him early on, and they maintained a close personal and political bond through the rest of their lives. Biden pointing out last night, for example, that when Beau Biden died back in 2015, the Carters were especially concerned about the president and Dr. Biden. So we will see him eulogize Jimmy Carter at his state funeral whenever it is officially announced. Biden had said a few years ago that Carter had asked him to eulogize him. And we're likely to see the other former presidents and their spouses in attendance, should their health allow it, which may mean that we see the former presidents together more than once in the month of January. First at the Carter funeral, which we anticipate will be announced shortly to be next week, but then again conceivably later in the month at the Trump inauguration. And we should point out, in a fluke of sort of tradition and custom, flags are now flying across the country, at least at government facilities, at half-staff, and they will for 30 days, which means they'll be at half-staff for the Trump inauguration, a nod to decorum and to a tribute to the former president.